Now, when it comes to the impact on the US specifically, there's long been this view that war is actually good for business, as evil as that sounds. Namely, because the government tends to increase spending during geopolitical conflicts, and because the US is very far removed from the devastation of these types of engagements, some hold the view that economic activity thrives during wars. And certainly we have seen periods in history of GDP growing strongly during major conflicts, and certain players will benefit from the current war. However, even with America's privileged position, there's still some meaningful negative consequences to its economy from these types of engagements. For one, US inflation tends to spike during geopolitical conflicts, in part from this higher government spending, something that will obviously be more pronounced here given the impact on the oil market and the broad disruptions to trade, with freight rates likely to surge and trade volumes likely to decrease. This may also lead to an increase in interest rates. The Federal Reserve is still grappling with the impacts of tariffs on price levels and may have to switch to hiking rates should we see a new inflation risk. And while US Treasury bond yields tend to decrease during geopolitical conflicts as investors buy the asset as a safe haven investment to protect their money, we've so far actually seen yields increase slightly, with fears over inflation seemingly offsetting this factor. Finally, we tend to see US debt increase during wars, again because of that heightened spending, which could prove problematic given the pressure on interest rates and the lost tariff revenue the White House experienced last month from the Supreme Court's ruling that Trump's IEEPA tariffs were illegal. I also won't spend a tremendous amount of time on stocks given the nature of the situation, but it is worth noting that while certain sectors, of course, experience a range of impacts during geopolitical conflicts in the short term, US stock market valuations in general haven't historically exhibited a direct relationship with geopolitical conflicts over the long term, according to the Institute of Economics and Peace. And while stocks do tend to experience a sell-off in the short term, returns tend to normalize thereafter, with performance often dominated by other variables. I'll just say it's not usually wise to trade off of short-term geopolitical headlines if you're investing for the long term, especially given that we just don't know how things will ultimately settle.